I stared at the DNA test results in my trembling hands, the numbers blurring through my tears. 99.98% match. The child I had been told was dead, the son I had mourned for 2 agonizing years, was alive. He was living 3 miles away in my sister's mansion, calling another woman Mom. The paper slipped from my fingers and floated to the floor in slow motion while my hands started shaking so violently I had to grip the edge of the table. My vision went red. My pulse pounded so hard I thought my skull would crack open. They hadn't just lied. They had stolen my baby, declared him dead, and gift-wrapped him for my sister. They had erased me from existence to cover their tracks. And they never expected me to find out. If you want to hear how a mother brought down an empire of lies to reclaim her stolen child, hit that like button and subscribe because this story is about to get wild. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my place, and let's dive into how this nightmare began. 2 years earlier, I was a different person. Sarah Jenkins was my name then, and I was 24 years old, pregnant and terrified. My boyfriend had disappeared the moment he saw the positive test, and I found myself back at my childhood home dependent on my parents, Richard and Eleanor Sterling. They were the kind of people whose names opened doors in our city, whose wealth bought silence, whose smiles hid calculated cruelty. I should have known better than to trust them. I should have seen the signs. But desperation makes you blind, and I was drowning. The day I went into labor started like any other. My mother had been hovering over me for weeks, controlling every aspect of my prenatal care, insisting I use her private doctor at her private hospital. She said it was for the best, that I needed discretion, that our family name required protection. I was too exhausted to argue. The contractions hit me hard around 3 in the morning, and within an hour I was in the delivery room, my mother on one side, my father on the other. My sister Victoria stood in the corner, her face pale, her hands clasped together like she was praying. I remember the pain. God, I remember the pain. But more than that, I remember the moment my son was born. I heard him cry. That sound, that beautiful piercing wail of new life, it cut through everything. I tried to lift my head to see him, my arms reaching out instinctively. But the doctor turned away quickly, and a nurse whisked him behind a curtain. My mother's hand clamped down on my shoulder with surprising strength. "Stay still, Sarah," she said, her voice tight. "Let them work." Something was wrong. I could feel it in the air, in the way the medical staff moved, with rehearsed precision, in the way my father's jaw was set like granite. I tried to call out, to demand they bring me my baby, but my voice came out weak and slurred. Someone had given me something, some drug that made my limbs heavy and my thoughts slow. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was my father nodding to the doctor, a single deliberate movement that felt like a signature on a contract. When I woke up, the room was dim and my body felt like it had been torn apart. A different nurse stood by my bedside, her eyes avoiding mine. "Where is my baby?" I croaked, my throat raw. "I want to see my son." She glanced toward the door nervously. "There were complications," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. Your mother will explain everything." Then she left before I could ask another question. Eleanor swept into the room moments later, dressed impeccably, as always, not a hair out of place, not a trace of emotion on her face. "The baby died, Sarah," she said flatly, as if announcing the weather. "There were complications during delivery. We did everything we could. The doctor will provide you with all the necessary documentation." My world stopped. Deet. My son was dead. "No," I gasped, shaking my head violently. "No, that's not possible." I heard him cry. I heard him. "You're in shock," my father said from the doorway, his voice cold and authoritative. "The baby is gone. We've made all the arrangements. You need to focus on recovering now." I screamed. I thrashed against the sheets, trying to get up to find someone who would tell me the truth. But my father moved faster than I expected for a man his age. His hands pinned me down, his face inches from mine. "Stop making a scene," he hissed. "You're hysterical. Do you want everyone to know what a disaster this has been? You will accept what happened and move on. Do you understand me?" The nurse returned with a syringe. "For the pain," she murmured, but I knew it was to silence me. The medication pulled me under again, and I surrendered to the darkness because fighting seemed impossible. They discharged me 2 days later with a death certificate bearing my son's name, a name I hadn't even gotten to speak aloud to him, and a hollow ache in my chest that felt like a physical wound. Victoria came to help me home, carrying a small bag of my belongings. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she whispered in the car. "This is awful." I couldn't even respond. The words felt meaningless, empty platitudes that did nothing to fill the void. At home, my mother confiscated my phone under the guise of protecting my mental health. No social media, no calls to old friends who might upset you, she declared. You need to heal in peace. She installed herself in the guest room, monitoring my every move. I was a prisoner in my own life, trapped in a fog of grief and medication they kept pushing on me. Take these, Sarah, they'll help you sleep. Take these, they'll calm your nerves. I took them because I didn't have the strength to refuse, and each pill pulled me further from reality. But grief has a way of sharpening you once the initial shock wears off. After a week, I started refusing the medication. I needed to think clearly. I needed to understand what had happened. Late at night, when my mother was asleep, I would sneak to the study and use the old desktop computer, searching for anything that might explain the complications that supposedly killed my son. I found inconsistencies in my medical records, signatures I didn't recognize, timestamps that didn't match my memories. One document showed I had signed a consent form for an emergency procedure at a time when I was definitely unconscious. The signature looked like mine, but something about it was wrong, the loops too perfect, too practiced. I started calling the hospital, pretending to be someone else, asking questions about procedures and protocols. I learned that the death rate for full-term healthy babies was extraordinarily low, that complications severe enough to cause death were almost always predictable. Nothing about my pregnancy had been high risk. The pieces weren't fitting together, but I didn't know what picture they were supposed to form. All I knew was that my parents were lying about something. 2 months passed in this strange limbo. I moved out of their house into a tiny apartment. I could barely afford working a part-time job at a coffee shop that didn't ask questions. My parents seemed relieved to have me gone, though. My mother called daily to check on me, her voice dripping with false concern. Victoria visited once a week, always bringing food, always offering those same useless condolences. Have you thought about therapy? She asked during one visit. It might help you process everything. I wanted to laugh. Therapy couldn't fix what was broken because what was broken wasn't grief. It was the growing certainty that I had been betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. Then came the invitation. Victoria and Oliver were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary with a garden party at their estate. My mother insisted I attend. It will be good for you to be around family, she said, though her tone made it clear this wasn't a request. I almost refused, but something made me go. Maybe it was the desperate hope that being around people would make me feel less alone. Maybe it was curiosity about what perfect life my sister was living while I drowned in grief. The party was everything I expected, elegant and suffocating, full of people in expensive clothes, making expensive small talk. I stood near the catering table nursing a glass of wine. I wasn't drinking, trying to decide how soon I could leave. That's when I saw him. A little boy, maybe 18 months old, toddling across the lawn with that determined wobble, unique to new walkers. He had dark curls, and when he looked up laughing at something, I saw his eyes. Deep brown with flecks of gold, exactly like mine. Exactly like my father's. My glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the stone patio. The boy turned at the sound, and his face, God, his face, was my baby's face, the face I had glimpsed for just a second before they took him away. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I moved toward him without conscious thought, my body operating on pure instinct. "Who is that?" I heard myself ask a nearby guest, my voice strange and distant. "Oh, that's little Ethan," the woman replied cheerfully. "Victoria and Oliver's son. Isn't he adorable? They're so lucky." Ethan. They had named him Ethan. My son had a name, and I hadn't been the one to give it to him. The world tilted sideways. I watched as Victoria scooped him up, kissing his cheek, and my mother appeared beside them, cooing over her grandson. "Look at you, my handsome boy," Eleanor said, her voice warm in a way it had never been with me. "You look just like your daddy." But he didn't. He looked like me. He had my eyes, my chin, the same cowlick I had battled my entire childhood. I don't know how I made it through the next hour. I smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, all while my mind raced through impossible calculations. The timeline fit. Ethan's age matched exactly when my son would have been. But that was insane. My parents couldn't have done something so monstrous. Could they? I waited until Victoria was alone, standing by the rose garden, before I approached her. "He's beautiful," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Your son." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Sarah. We're very blessed." "How old is he?" I asked, though I already knew. 18 months, she replied, her hand fidgeting with her necklace. "He'll be 2 in May." May. My son had been born in May. "Victoria," I said slowly, carefully, "can I ask you something?" Her face went pale. "Of course." When did you and Oliver start the adoption process? I never knew you were considering it. The necklace snapped in her hand, beads scattering across the grass. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. That's when my mother materialized between us, her smile sharp as a knife. Sarah, darling, Eleanor said, her hand gripping my elbow painfully tight. Let's not bother Victoria with ancient history. She and Oliver went through a very private process, and we'd like to respect that. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let this go. He looks familiar. I pressed my eyes, locked on my sister's face. He has our eyes, doesn't he? Family resemblance is strong in the Sterling line. My father appeared next, his bulk blocking my view of Ethan. I think you've had too much sun, Sarah, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Why don't you go home and rest? This isn't the time or place for whatever you're trying to start. But I was already starting it. Something inside me had cracked open and I couldn't seal it back up. I want to hold him, I said, moving toward Ethan. Just for a moment. Please. Richard's hand shot out, catching my wrist in a grip that would leave bruises. No, he said flatly. You're leaving. Now. The party had gone quiet around us, guests pretending not to watch the scene unfolding. Victoria clutched Ethan tighter, turning away from me. I'm sorry, she whispered, but I didn't know if she was apologizing to me or to our parents. They escorted me to my car like I was a criminal, my father's hand never leaving my arm. If you ever pull something like that again, he said as he opened my car door, you will regret it. That boy is Victoria's son. He was adopted legally and properly. You have no claim, no rights, and no business asking questions. Do I make myself clear? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not my father but a stranger, a man capable of anything to protect his perfect image. Crystal clear, I said, and drove away. But I wasn't going home to rest. I was going home to tear apart every piece of paper, every document, every shred of evidence I could find. My apartment became a war room. I spread out my medical records, the death certificate, my old hospital bills, Victoria's social media posts from the past 2 years. I built a timeline, and the more I looked, the more the picture came into focus. Victoria had announced her pregnancy to family only. No social media posts, no public appearances showing a baby bump. She had gone on a convenient 3-month vacation to Europe during what would have been her 3rd trimester. The adoption papers I managed to access through a friend who worked in family court showed the biological mother was listed as deceased. Deceased. They had declared me dead on paper to give my son to my sister. The rage that filled me was cleaner and colder than anything I had felt before. This wasn't grief anymore. This was war. I spent the next week planning with the precision of a general. I couldn't just show up and demand my son back. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would stand up in any court. I needed allies. And I needed to be smarter than they had ever given me credit for. First, I legally changed my name to Maya Anderson. Sarah Jenkins was dead according to their paperwork, so I would become someone else, someone they couldn't trace easily. I enrolled in community college classes, created a new social media presence, started building a life that looked normal and stable. I got a job at the community center where Victoria volunteered, where she brought Ethan twice a week for toddler playgroup. It took 3 weeks before she noticed me. I had dyed my hair, lost weight from stress, changed my style. When she finally recognized me, her face went white. Sarah, she breathed. What are you doing here? I'm going by Maya now, I said calmly, stacking foam blocks for the children. Fresh start and all that. I'm a volunteer coordinator. Small world, isn't it? She looked like she wanted to run, but Ethan had already toddled over to the toy bin I was organizing. She couldn't leave without making a scene. Over the following weeks, I made myself indispensable to her. I was kind, understanding, never mentioning that terrible party. I had learned to forgive, I told her one afternoon as we watched the children play. I had been sick with grief, and I lashed out at the wrong people. I'm sorry for that. I want us to be sisters again. The relief on her face was painful to watch. She wanted so desperately to believe me, to believe that the guilt I knew was eating her alive could be absolved. We started having coffee together, meeting at the park, talking about nothing and everything. Ethan warmed to me quickly. Children have instincts adults forget. He would reach for me, want me to push his swing fall asleep on my shoulder during story time. Each touch felt like a piece of my heart sliding back into place. Do you have children, Maya? He asked me once, his little hand in mine as we walked to the parking lot. His speech was getting clearer every day. I used to dream about having a son, I told him honestly, kneeling to his level. I would have loved him more than anything in the world. Family is the most important thing, right? That's what Grandma Eleanor always says. He nodded seriously. Family is everything, he repeated, and I had to turn away so he wouldn't see my tears. Yes, sweetheart, I whispered. It is. And I'm going to get my family back. Meanwhile, I was building my case. Through a lawyer friend from college who owed me a favor, I obtained copies of all the adoption paperwork. The biological mother consent forms the termination of parental rights, all of it signed by a dead woman who looked remarkably alive in her new life as Maya Anderson. I hired a private investigator who specialized in medical fraud. He found the paper trail my parents had left arrogant in their certainty that no one would ever look. Payments to the attending nurse, payments to the doctor, payments to the funeral home that had cremated an empty casket. The nurse was the weak link. She had retired early, moved to a small town upstate, living quietly with what I imagined was crushing guilt. I showed up at her door on a Tuesday morning. Karen Martinez, I said when she opened it, her face going gray as she recognized me despite my new appearance. I think we need to talk about what happened at Mercy General Hospital 2 years ago. She tried to close the door, but I put my foot in the way. I'm not here to hurt you, I said quickly. I'm here to give you a chance to make this right. The truth is going to come out either way. You can be part of the solution or part of the problem. She broke down crying on her porch, and I sat with her while she told me everything. How my mother had approached her months before my due date, how they had planned every detail, how they had convinced her that I was an unfit mother, unstable and dangerous, that they were protecting the baby by finding him a proper home. They told me you had tried to harm yourself during the pregnancy, Karen sobbed. They showed me fake medical records, psychiatric evaluations. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was saving that baby from a terrible situation. They paid me $50,000, and I took it because my husband was dying and we needed the money. I've regretted it every single day since. I recorded every word. I took her written statement signed and notarized. I had my smoking gun, but I needed one more piece. I needed DNA evidence that Ethan was mine, and that meant getting a sample without tipping off my parents. It happened almost by accident. Ethan had a bad tumble at the playground, scraped his knee, and blood soaked through the bandage Victoria applied. I'm so clumsy, I said, helping clean up. I got blood on my sleeve. Victoria was too distracted, comforting Ethan, to notice me carefully, folding the tissue I had used to dab at his knee, sealing it in a plastic bag later. I sent it to a private lab along with my own sample. The results took 2 weeks that felt like 2 years. When the email came through, I was at work and I had to lock myself in the bathroom to read it. Probability of maternity 99.98%. I had my son. They had stolen my son. And now I had proof. I sat on that cold tile floor and laughed until I cried, until the sounds blurred together into something that might have scared me if I had heard it from someone else. Then I wiped my face, stood up, and got to work on phase 2. Destroying the people who had destroyed me. I started with the state adoption board. Anonymous tips are wonderful things. I sent them copies of the adoption paperwork alongside the death certificate and my current identification proving Sarah Jenkins was very much alive. I included Karen's testimony, the financial records showing payments from my parents to her and the doctor, and a detailed timeline. Then I filed a formal complaint with the state medical board against the doctor who had falsified my son's death. And finally, I contacted a lawyer, not my friend, but a real attorney who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. Lisa Chen took one look at my evidence and smiled like a shark. "This is going to be the easiest case I've ever won," she said. "But it's also going to be incredibly ugly. Your parents are going to fight with everything they have. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been preparing for 2 years," I told her. "Let them fight. I'm not the scared girl they manipulated anymore. I'm a mother who wants her son back, and I will burn their world to the ground if that's what it takes." Lisa's smile widened. "Then let's get started." The first cracks appeared within a week. Victoria called me, her voice high and panicked. "Sarah, Maya, whoever you are," she said. "Someone from the state adoption services came to our house asking questions. They want to see all our paperwork. They're talking about fraud investigations. Do you know anything about this?" I felt calm, centered, like I was finally standing on solid ground after years of drowning. "I might," I said. "Did you know Victoria? When you adopted Ethan, did you know he was my son?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "Answer me," demanded. "Did you know?" "Mom said you were dead," she finally whispered. "She said there was a girl who had died in childbirth and we could adopt her baby. She said it was fate that God was giving me the child I couldn't have naturally." I didn't know it was you, Sarah. I swear I didn't know until that party, until I saw your face when you looked at him. And you said nothing, I said, my voice shaking. You knew for months and you said nothing. You let me believe my child was dead while you played house with him. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know what to do. Mom and Dad said it would destroy everyone if the truth came out. They said you were building a new life and we should let you move on. Move on, I repeated. They killed me on paper, Victoria. They had my name put on adoption documents as a deceased birth mother. They committed fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. And you went along with it because it was easier than standing up to them. You're not a victim here. You're an accomplice. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. What do you want? She gasped. What can I do to make this right? Tell the truth, I said. When the investigators come back, you tell them everything. You testify against Mom and Dad. You do that and maybe I won't fight you on visitation rights after I get my son back. But if you protect them, if you lie for them one more time, I will make sure you never see Ethan again. Do you understand? I understand, she whispered, and hung up. 3 days later, my father showed up at my apartment. I had been expecting him. He didn't knock, just used some key or lock-picking method to barge in like he owned the place. You ungrateful little bitch, he snarled, his face purple with rage. Everything we did for you. You were a mess, a disaster waiting to happen. You couldn't have raised that child. We gave him a good home, a proper family. And now you're trying to destroy us out of spite. It's not spite, I said, standing my ground, even though my heart was racing. It's justice. You stole my baby. You faked his death. You committed crimes, Dad. Multiple felonies. And now you're going to pay for them. He moved toward me and I grabbed my phone, already recording. Take one more step and I'm calling the police, I said. You think you can intimidate me? You think I'm still that scared girl you could push around? I have evidence, I have witnesses, I have a DNA test proving Ethan is mine. You have nothing but your money and your name, and those won't save you from prison. He stopped, his hands clenching and unclenching. We did what was best, he repeated, but his voice had lost its certainty. We protected you from making a mistake you couldn't come back from. No, I said. You protected your reputation. You couldn't stand the scandal of your unwed daughter raising a bastard child. You decided I wasn't good enough to be a mother, so you took that choice away from me. You didn't protect me. You violated me in the worst way possible. And now everyone is going to know exactly what kind of people you are. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something I had never seen in my father's eyes before. Fear. You'll regret this, he said, but it sounded hollow. I don't think I will, I replied. But you definitely will. Get out of my apartment. The next week was a blur of legal proceedings. The state launched a full investigation. My lawyer filed for emergency custody, and to my shock and relief, the judge granted it pending the investigation's outcome. There will be a hearing in 30 days, Lisa told me, her hand on my shoulder. Until then, Ethan stays with Victoria, but you get supervised visitation. It's not perfect, but it's a start. That first visitation was the hardest thing I had ever done. Ethan didn't understand why we were meeting in a strange office with a woman watching us. Where's Mommy? He kept asking, meaning Victoria. I had to swallow my pain and smile. She'll be back soon, sweetie, I said. Right now, you and I get to play together. Is that okay? He was wary at first, but children are resilient. We played with blocks, read stories, and I told him things I had wanted to tell him for 2 years. I love you, I whispered as he dozed off in my lap near the end of our session. I have always loved you. Even when I didn't know where you were, I loved you. The social worker had tears in her eyes when she escorted him back to Victoria. That boy knows you, she said to me. I've done this job for 15 years, and I can tell. He feels safe with you. That's not something you can fake. Victoria surprised me. When the formal investigation began, she testified. She told them everything, provided documents, corroborated Karen's testimony. My mother tried to discredit her, called her a liar and a traitor, but the evidence was overwhelming. Oliver filed for divorce, wanting to distance himself from the scandal, but Victoria didn't seem to care. She came to one of my supervised visits and asked to speak with me privately. I know I can never make up for what I did, she said, her eyes red from crying. I know I should have fought harder, should have questioned things. I was so desperate for a baby that I let myself believe their lies. But I do love him, Sarah. I know he's your son, but I love him too. I know you do, I said, and I meant it. That's why I'm not going to cut you out completely. When I get full custody, and I will, you can still see him. You can still be Aunt Victoria. But he needs to know the truth. He needs to know I'm his mother and that I fought to get him back." She nodded, sobbing. "Thank you," she managed. "You're being more generous than I deserve." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Ethan. He deserves to have as much love as possible, even if it's complicated." The trial was everything I had dreamed of and feared. My parents hired the best lawyers money could buy, but money can't erase facts. The evidence was damning. The payments, the falsified documents, Karen's testimony, the DNA, results everything painted, a picture of calculated fraud and conspiracy. The prosecution charged them with falsification of records, fraud, bribery, and child trafficking. My mother sat stone-faced through the entire proceeding, refusing to show any emotion. My father tried to take the stand to explain their actions, but his testimony only made things worse. "We were protecting our family's reputation," he said, as if that justified everything. "We made a difficult choice in a difficult situation." The prosecutor, a woman who reminded me of Lisa, tore him apart. "You made a choice to commit fraud, conspiracy, and deprive a mother of her child," she said coldly. "You made a choice to destroy documents, bribe medical personnel, and lie to state agencies. And you made these choices not out of concern for anyone's well-being, but because you valued your social standing more than your daughter's rights as a mother. Is that correct, Mr. Sterling?" He had no answer that didn't incriminate him further. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. My mother's mask finally cracked when they read the verdict. She looked at me across the courtroom with such hatred that I actually felt cold. But I didn't look away. I met her eyes and held them until she turned away first. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. My father got 6 years in federal prison, my mother got 5. They would also face massive fines and restitution payments to me for emotional damages. Their assets were frozen, their reputations destroyed. The society they had cared about so much shunned them completely. More importantly, I was granted full custody of Ethan. The judge's words still echo in my mind. "This court finds that the child in question, Ethan Sterling Anderson, is the biological son of Maya Anderson, formerly Sarah Jenkins, and that his adoption by Victoria Sterling was procured through fraud and illegal means. Therefore, full custody is awarded to the biological mother with supervised visitation rights granted to Victoria Sterling provided she maintains compliance with all court requirements." The gavel came down and I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. Telling Ethan the truth was the hardest conversation I've ever had. We did it slowly over weeks with the help of a child psychologist. "I'm your first mommy," I told him, holding his little hands in mine. "When you were born, some people made a mistake and we got separated. But I never stopped loving you and I never stopped looking for you. Now we get to be together like we were always supposed to be." He processed it the way children do, with questions and confusion and eventually acceptance. Victoria helped reassuring him that everyone still loved him, that having more people who cared about him wasn't a bad thing. Today, 6 months after the trial, Ethan and I have a routine. He calls me Mama now, though sometimes he slips and calls Victoria Mommy V, which doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would. We live in a small house with a big backyard where he can play. I'm finishing my degree in social work, wanting to help other women who find themselves trapped and powerless like I was. Victoria visits twice a week, and while things are still sometimes awkward between us, we're building something that looks like forgiveness. My parents are in prison and I haven't visited them once. I got a letter from my mother last month that I burned without reading. They stole 2 years of my son's life from me, 2 years of firsts I can never get back. His first steps, his first words, his first birthday. Those are gone forever and no amount of apology can return them. But I have him now. I have my son, and that's what matters. Last week we went to the park. Ethan was on the swings laughing, that pure, joyful laugh children have, and I was pushing him higher and higher. I looked up and saw a black sedan drive slowly past. Through the tinted window, I could see my father's face being transported to some work detail. Our eyes met for just a second. I saw regret there, and fear and loss. I felt nothing. I turned back to my son, to my future, and let the past drive away. Ethan jumped off the swing and ran to me, throwing his arms around my legs. "I love you, Mama," he said, and those 3 words healed something in me I didn't know could be healed. "I love you too, baby," I whispered, kissing the top of his head. "Forever and always." The truth is, revenge isn't as sweet as people say. It's messy and painful and expensive. But justice, real justice, is worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of fear. I didn't just want to punish my parents. I wanted my son back, and I wanted him to grow up knowing that his mother fought for him, that he was worth fighting for. In the end, that's what matters. Not the trial, not the prison sentences, not the money or the ruined reputations. What matters is that Ethan knows he is loved, that he is safe, and that no one will ever take him from me again. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to fight for something everyone told you to give up on? Have you ever had to become someone stronger than you thought possible just to survive? Drop your stories in the comments because I want to hear them. And if this story touched you, if you understand what it means to fight for the people you love, hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and no one has the right to steal your truth. Thank you for listening to my story.